to Good Morning Cranberry. Today's hosts are Anna and Amber. And our guest of honor today is Susan Ward. Take it away.
Oh, that's fun. That's wonderful.
Good morning, Susan Ward. How are you today?
Good morning, Amber. I'm very well, thank you.
We're going to ask you some questions today. When and where were you born?
Oh, my word. When and where was I born? I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1936. What if I told you 1898?
I believe you.
Uh-oh. In 1936.
Where did you grow up?
A place called Wilmington, Delaware. Do you know a man named Joe Biden? Have you heard of him? That's where he comes from.
Well, what was your childhood like?
Fun.
Yeah?
Oh my gosh, yes. I got to grow up in the country around before the war. You know, it wasn't the War of 1812. With they were all farms with cattle. They were all milk business, and so it was way out in the country. So I got to play. I just had one brother, and I got to play with him outdoors all the time. Is where we were. So we had, and then I also came up to Maine in summers for years and years and years. But also that was down in Portland, and right next to Portland Headline. But that again was just a family, and we made up all our own fun. Yeah.
Who are your parents?
My mother was named Speakman, and she came from a family that you guys wouldn't know. But if you ever look up at a shower head, you might see Speakman shower. Have you ever seen that, Phil?
No, I don't think
Well,
so.
they made Speakman shower heads and plumbing thing for years, which went all over the world, and they were doing their best to keep everybody clean. So that was my mother's family, and they had been in Wilmington for years. And my father's family came from Trenton, and they were all musicians and editors of opera critics and things like that.
Oh, cool. Well, where did you go to grade school?
I went to a small co-ed school called Tower Hill School, and they were very, very strict, and they had very high standards, and you were given a report every 6 weeks, and you got a grade, and then you got an effort.
Oh.
So everybody was on their toes, and the headmaster was about, when you're very little, people look big, right? But he was big, and he was about 300 pounds and 6 feet 4 or 5, and he was simply terrifying. So that's where I went to school.
Did you enjoy getting up?
No, I was terrified to death.
Oh.
What kind of student were you?
Well, I worked hard. Was a lousy student up to 9th grade, and then I put the pedal to the metal, and then I was a good student. Yeah.
Well, what did you do for fun?
When I was young, oh gosh, I played a lot of tennis. I played piano. And I lived outdoors, and had a lot of buddies, a lot of friends, weekends, overnights, and time with friends. Yeah, probably. It comes kind of quick. Yeah.
How would your classmates remember you?
Athletic. I couldn't see, but I could run, and I could throw. And so that was helpful because they'd hit a hockey ball a mile and so forth.
Did you have any favorite stories from school?
Good Lord. Favorite story. Well, fast forward. Then I went from that school to a school down in Danville, North Carolina, and that is in the remote sticks. And that was what was called a girls' boarding school in those days. And they sent you down there to get you out of trouble. No boys, right? No boys, no nothing. No parties, no nothing. And that's where the stories began. And one time a student was able to bring a cow into the school, a whole cow, and get it to walk up the steps. And then, of course, the cow couldn't come back down. And that was quite a trauma. And there were lots of goings on in that school which were naughty. They were good stories. And my favorite, I'll tell you a funny story. Maybe it's not so funny now, but in those days, here being homeschooled, there was always a rector who was a man or a woman, and they were pretty serious, disciplined people. And school always began with an assembly, right? Everybody gathers at their desks, and you sing a hymn. And somebody tells you what's going to happen during the day, and then before your classes start, right? And this particular day, there was a woman who was the music teacher, and older than I am now, I think. And there was an upright piano on the stage. And you know what I mean by upright piano, right? Not a, well, it stands upright. The one here is in the church is. It's not a grand piano that goes big like this. And she went to play the hymn. And she's got all ready, and she goes, boom, for the first chord. And nothing happens. It goes thud. So she tries again, boom, and same thing happens. Thud, thump. And a third time, and she looks up at the rector and she says, Mr. Hardy, there's something the matter with this piano. Well, she quit. Well, we found out later that my own roommate, you don't ever do this, had taken a bunch of hymnals and put them up. If you open the top of a piano, they're hammers, right? They go on the strings. Well, she put them between the hammer and the string. So when you hit the hammer, it goes punk. And that's the end of the music. Now, that was the kind of pranks that were done. That was very funny. And then there was another one, to get me going on a little, where my daughter had something to do with this at the earlier school, where she and a couple of guys set up alarm clocks on the stage, the same assembly, another school, but it's the same format of assembly. And they hid these alarm clocks all over the stage, and they set them 5 minutes apart. So the head of school gets up and and bing goes one up. So he goes over, finds that, and puts it down, and then 5 minutes later, bing through the whole thing. Well, that was quite good stuff. But they don't do that anymore, right? There's
Not
no
that I
more.
heard.
They're not more. They're somehow those silly pranks have gone by the wayside. But there were some of them fun. Yeah.
What did you do for a living?
Oh man. I had a number of jobs. I taught camp for a while. I worked for the American Field Service. I worked for what is our financial institute in Washington, D.C., the Federal Reserve in Washington for several years, a year. And then years later, after I got married, I had a whole lot of kids. And in our days, women pretty well stayed home. And we just did. And it was the odd thing to go to work, believe it or not. And that's changed so drastically. But and then I taught yoga for about 4 years. So that's what I did.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, how did you get in your line of work? Can you tell us more about that?
Get into which? The yoga?
How did you get in your line of work?
Well, it was all over the place. It wasn't one line of work. But I got in yoga because we were sent to Japan. You all don't know this, but there was a time in our history in this country when there was universal training, military training. Your dads had to go into the army, like it or not. They went, unless they were deferred. So when that happened for us, we were sent to Japan. And boy, that was for 3 years. And so that was really cool. And I knew nothing about any of that. And so we had 3 amazing years of being able to really stumble through another culture and learn, and there's just nothing like it in the world. And you really find out about your own culture and other cultures. It's fascinating. So I got used to things Eastern, hence the dragon and the wonderful stuff like that in the pagoda. And long ago, and then that led to yoga was just coming in the United States, just beginning in black and white TV. And I got interested in that, and then I ended up getting very interested in Eastern philosophy. And that led one thing to another, and took a lot of courses, and also taught a lot of courses in it. So that's how the line of work developed. Which is kind of ahead of stuff, because we got sent to Japan, before it all came sweeping into this culture. Like that. Yeah.
When you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A nurse. That was kind of what a policeman wasn't open. And some of the other things that women are today. And it was interesting. Yeah, those were the sort of, the service sort of things that were available.
What lessons did your work life teach you?
Oh, man. You know what? My work life, I would rather discuss what my academic life taught me, which was something you all know, but we were always taught to stand on our own feet, right, Phil?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And you independent and self-reliant was the thing. And I learned the hard way that when you get into a tough place, get help. And don't be afraid. By which I mean, in graduate school I had to take statistics, and I'm glad it now. And they had said, get this done right away. Don't let it go to the end, because a lot of students will do that because they won't take it. And I did just that. When I got to it, I just floundered, absolutely floundered. And I should have gotten help. Quick, quick, get a C, get the thing done, right? That's it. That's what I learned. And from the work life, of course, is you learn more from students, and you learn, when you teach, it's the way you learn. It's a paradoxical thing, but if you want to learn something, teach it.
Tell me something about your career. Other than money, what inspired you to keep working?
Oh, gosh. The joy that people got out of what you're able to do, and that they felt that it improved them. What is Samantha Board over there? Are you? Can you put both feet up in the air? Point your toes. Bring them down. That's good. Yep.
If you could do anything now, what would it be?
Man, I wish you'd give me preparation on this.
Sorry.
Could do anything now. Oh. Well, it's not very realistic at my age, but I'd go to the moon.
Cool.
I would. Mm-hmm. But I think a body at this age is not a good idea in a moon capsule. Any more? I'll ask you guys these questions. That'd be fun.
Do you plan to retire, and if retired, do you like it?
I am retired. Yes, because you can. It's if you have enough interests, it's a time where things are just fascinating, and there's time to do things, and above all, you can keep your life simpler, and you're not dragged around so much, and you're not reacting all the time. You get to act and not react, and it's a privilege, and yes, wonderful. One of the good things about getting old, I would say.
How is the island different than it is today? So can you tell us a little bit about some of the differences you noticed?
You know, I've lost touch, because when I knew about things here is basically because I used to play a lot of tennis, and that tennis court was so active you couldn't even get on it. I don't think it is today. I go past, I don't see very many people there once in a while, but nothing used to be just nonstop. And we used to bribe each other to get on the court or make up stories so that you could get a couple hours back to back. So I knew a lot of people pretty well years ago, and I loved them, and they're all old or dead. I'm not the right person to compare today and in those years. The only thing I think, this is a microcosm, and I'm amazed when I think back, and sometimes I do this and people tell me to shut up, is make a list of everybody who's died. It is extraordinary, just extraordinary. Starting way back with, I can't think, who was the mother of the twins? Keith and Heath.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, Allie.
No, Keith and Heath, Debbie
yes.
Wedge.
Yeah, Debbie Wedge's husband.
Keith.
Keith,
yes.
right. And he's just the beginning of it all. Salt and Stall, just incredible. Anyway, it's up in the 40s or 50s in this tiny, tiny island, basically. It's interesting. So you need somebody else to tell you the difference in all these years. But we have been here, gosh, since we bought property here in 1985. And the house was finished in 87, so it was a long time we've been here. I said, you girls don't know the play Thornton Wilder's Our Town, do you? No? Well, it's a classic American play, and it begins with a overvoice. It's as famous as Wizard of Oz. And it begins with an overvoice of somebody who's in heaven talking about our town. I forget now whether it's somebody who is new in the town, but every time I come on this island every year, I hear that voice saying, well, now there's the store. And that's where the tennis court was in the old days. And that's where Jane Vance used to live. And I go right down the whole island and I hear everything. And in that sense, it hasn't changed. There is very little that's been different. Different families in different houses. But the basic bones are still the same, which is just wonderful. That we love. Yeah.
Where else have you lived?
Well, Delaware, up here, Maine, Japan, South Africa. That's it. Yeah.
What is your favorite Cranberry Island walk?
My own magic path.
Yeah.
And then, anybody's invited. I spend hours on it every year, and it's up there on the road after you go through over Make Brook and down towards follow that down across the side of the ocean there. And it goes way back, and it's absolutely magical. It's almost in rocks. So that's my favorite walk.
Sounds nice. What is your earliest memory of the island?
A clear one. Coming out here in 1985, looking for, I had received word from Robinson real estate people that there was property available here to buy. And we decided that we wanted to buy property finally after we had been on Islesford for years. We'd summer people on Islesford for many years prior to that, maybe 20 of them. And we decided we would buy some land. And it turned up finally that there was a piece here for sale. And the real estate people don't like to come out here much because it's a waste of their time. But if you twist their arm, they will. And the first time we came out here was August of 1985, and walked down the main road, and there was a yellow for sale sign out on the road, said Robinson Real Estate. And we walked down the road and no idea what was for sale. Whether it was big, little, it was trashed, there were automobile parts all over the place, and there were cut down trees, and that we couldn't see whether the property was, most properties are big in the back and little on the ocean front, or whether it was big on the ocean front and went back, and it turned out to be that way. But that's the first memory, was walking down the road and then down the drive, and just as we walked down the drive, an enormous sloop went sailing past in the ocean. It was kind of like a good omen. So that was our first memory. And then we ended up buying that land, in spite of, you girls don't know this, do you know about the house that burnt down there? Do you know that, Amber? No. Well, in 1963, there was a man named Sherman. You know the Sherman bookstore over in Bar Harbor? Yeah, you know Sherman bookstore?
I think so.
Well, it's still there. The Shermans were a family up here for years. And in 1963, Bill Sherman brought his, you know this, Bill?
Yes.
Bill Sherman brought his daughter out. And one of his daughters, she's about 12, and she was handicapped. I don't know what we call her now. I just don't know, but she was seriously handicapped. And they brought a friend with her who was 13 years old. And they came out on a Friday night in a ferry boat to spend the weekend. And he told the two girls to go up to the house right next door to us and call home and say they'd arrived on the island safely, which they did. And actually the friend, then they came back. They came back from Charlotte Harmon's house. And Bill Sherman had you know what a hibachi is? It's a little gas stove which used to be very popular for grilling things. And he had a hibachi up on the table, and he had a can of kerosene right next to it, and it self-ignited and exploded and blew up, and with which the whole house caught on fire. And he couldn't get, had a little bit too much to drink, I think, but he couldn't get his daughter that was retarded out of the house. You know how horses won't get out of a burning barn? You ever heard that?
Yeah.
You can't get a horse, that's very hard. And in spite of the fact it's terrifying. And he couldn't get this kid out of the house. And the little friend, who was 13, was okay, ran out of the house. And with that, the whole house burnt down. And it killed him and the daughter, both. So after that, the Shermans, they kept the property, but it was not used. Nobody came out here. They couldn't bear it. It was just too painful. So that's whom we bought the property from, 20 years after that fire, because that was in June of 63, I believe. The records of it down there downstairs.
What you don't know, Susan,
Yeah.
is that my first wife was invited out, and she changed her mind,
Yeah.
and so the other little girl came out instead. But it could have been my first wife in the
No
fire.
kidding.
And instead it was Carmen Sanford that came out, and
And
she survived.
good heavenly days. Well, that's a scary point, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. And Bill Sherman could have survived himself.
Yeah.
He went back in.
To help to get the kid out,
His
right?
daughter, and she, I believe, was curled up on the sofa.
I
She
think so.
panicked and curled up and
Yeah, yeah.
refused to leave, and then they both
Yeah.
perished.
Just a terrible, what's interesting is that the present house that we had a kind of outrageous architect who built it, but he was good. Just without knowing it, he set the house that's there now, almost identically where the original house was. It was the same kind of a length of a house, and we can find the foundations are still there in pink granite. Boulders that are under, cobbles that are underneath the foundation of that house are still there, where that house was. So that's, where were we all this? That was a dramatic story and a pretty upsetting one
Yeah.
for everybody.
Well, let's change the subject. What are you most proud of?
Oh, my kids, I think. I think I can answer that, yep. And I have a definition of being a good parent. I don't know what your mom would think. You know what it is?
What?
Do no harm.
That's a good motto.
I think as a parent, I was thinking the other day, your kids grow up and they grow up in your own cave. And a lot of them can't get out, and sometimes they're not happy in it. And it can be, it's no match for a small child, is what they're being taught in that cave. And so sometimes if it's good, to change the metaphors, good potting soil, that's good. So I think so, I would say my kids, yeah, I feel very fulfilled, about satisfied. I guess those are not the right word, but contented with this, yeah, yeah.
That's good.
Speaking of children, what would you give advice to children coming to the island?
Play outside. Get off your damn cell phones and your video games and invent, smells, taste, be with the outdoors. Yeah, that was easy. Yeah, swim.
Well, what have you learned from life? What is the most important thing?
Oh, God, I knew that question was coming. I guess sense of humor,
Yeah.
patience. Yeah, and my training now is pretty heavily in, I hate to use the word, Eastern philosophy, which gives you a kind of a different slant on how you look at things a little bit. You tend to let go of stuff a little, or try to let go of stuff, instead of getting riled up and heated, and keep a little bit of a more of an even kind of keel. Yeah.
Oh, cool. What is the funniest thing that has happened to you recently?
Why don't you give me these questions ahead of time? The funniest thing. Oh my God. No, that's not appropriate. Funniest thing. I can't come up with that. It'll come to you about 3 minutes. Plenty of them.
All right. What are your hobbies?
What are my hobbies? Piano playing. I play classical piano with lots of mistakes, and it gets better, but it's still what it is. And I read tremendous amount. All kinds of things. It's pretty wide reading, and I couldn't live without that. Other hobbies, and also working outdoors, I would say.
Cool.
Yeah.
What influenced you most in life, and how?
Good grief. Huh. That's a tough one, because there's a lot of stuff. It's sort of, what's the best, what's the worst? Those are tough answers to give. I might say, without thinking, living 50 years with my husband, who's a very different person than I am. And I think I've learned a great deal from him. And also how to have I hate the word be in a relationship, but how to live with somebody and how to appreciate another person, all that kind of thing. I think I'd have to answer that, unless I thought more deeply about it. But that's what comes to my mind first. Doesn't mean it's all peaches and cream.
So we have our last question. How were you involved in the formation of the Great Cranberry Island Historical Society?
Oh, because I just thought it was just too fascinating, the history here. And I guess it started by staying in the little red house, which belonged to Dorothy and John Towns. You all don't know. And they're both dead, I believe.
Yes.
And he had an amazing library, books in there that were all about, he had quite a collection, they were all about stories of Maine. And then he also had, and I prowled through it, I must say, lots of records. He had the copy of the newspaper. That's when I learned about the specifics of the fire. Because he kept the clippings from the newspaper, and he had a lot of things like that. And I read through about everything I could find in that house. And that was sort of the beginning of what was the question of somebody thinking about of towns and the fire. What was the question?
How you were involved.
Yeah. So I thought the stories were, and of course Nathaniel Bowditch and the whole business of Hitty was just fascinating. And so we started a little group, really for questions. And I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. Do you remember Jeff Weisbrook?
I knew the name, I never knew in person.
He came, interesting person, one of the brightest people I've ever met, and by that I mean those people who see out of the sides of their eyes and connect dots that other people just don't do. And Jeff came with us from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to be a cook one summer. We just had far too many people, didn't want to spend the whole time in the kitchen. And he was with us about 3 summers, and he was present for one of those meetings. And we set up, the group decided they would finance a proper person in oral history to come and take the oral history from Tud Bunker. And it was to be done with a trained person, because when you're going to do an oral history well, you need to be trained as how to do it and how to record it. Well, darn, if he just didn't go up and do it that winter on his own. And I thought it was not a good ploy, but good work did come out of it. But that started a long time ago, and when Tud was still alive, and he had then what you girls said, there was a very famous anthropologist on this island named Marvin Harris, and he was well published. He taught at Columbia for years, and that's some way we've lost a couple of those people here. Cummings and Marvin Harris. And when I studied a lot of anthropology, which I loved, they would devote a week to Marvin Harris's work. And he was that seminal thinker. And he had I don't want to go into what but he was here for summers, every summer, and his closest buddy was Tud Bunker. And Tud was his go-to person for stories and really kind of the anthropology of this island. So that's that.
Well, I think we finished all our questions. So
Yeah.
thank you for.
You're so welcome.
Can I just ask the audience if they have any questions?
The audience.
Loaded question, Sue.
Yeah.
You and Rod initially, you said, went to Islesford for a few years
We did.
for summers.
Yeah.
Was there any particular reason why you chose Great Cranberry over Islesford to live?
Yeah, and it's basically practical because there wasn't anything for sale over there, just nothing. And if anything came up, it moved within a family quicker than a nanosecond. It never even came on the market.
Yeah.
And the funny story about that was that after all those years in Islesford, and it was pretty rough going because we lived in the Delafield house, there, and I had no car and barely a bike, and I used to get the groceries in a red wheelbarrow and take them back up through that woods, bumpity bump over all the roots and stuff. Anyway, it had its strenuous aspects to it, and so by the time we decided to look for Maine, there was a big hassle about since we could do this. I mean, it's just a privilege to be able to do it. Was lakes or ocean, and I figured that lakes you could get to ski if we ever did that, and the ocean was kind of. I had grown up in Portland Head, as I said, right on the ocean in summer. And so there wasn't anything there, and I had it with islands. So I went all up and down the coast to Scarsborough and Tennant's Harbor and looked for houses and stuff. And anything that was available needed a lot of work and it's going to be really expensive. And so just about the time I was coming home and giving up, I got this call from the real estate people in Southwest Orange. He said, well, there's property on Great Cranberry. And I thought, oh God, I'll bet it. Back on an island. And so that's how it happened. And we really hadn't a clue what it was. Nobody did. They didn't know it was 2 acres, 3 acres. Sue Lyman didn't know what it was. And It was just a kind of rough and peculiar beginning is what it was.
So you knew quite a few of the old timers probably on Isle Street
Yes.
before you came over
Yes,
here.
yeah. And that whole scene, which is so different, I always felt the difference was, one was kind of like a little town, and really a little town. This was more of a rural, setup in a way. So we feel hugely fortunate that it turned out as it did, of course, because we've got a large family up here, and we'll see how it goes in the next hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then I have a question.
Yeah.
So you choose to summer here on the island, correct? Okay. And what would you find the toughest things? Because everybody always thinks, oh, island summers, it's just wonderful and beautiful, and it is. But there's always a tough thing about being on the island, I think.
I know what that is.
Yeah, and I'm just curious what yours is.
90% of our problems we make ourselves.
Okay.
And there's a ton of them. It's like, who left the battery running in the car? Who didn't fill the boat with gas? Who did this? Who did that? Who forgot to tell X family that there was a picnic at 7 o'clock and now they're furious over that?
Who lost the keys?
Who went over without the keys?
Yeah.
And that part. But I must say that the respect we have for the winter population is enormous. And what that takes is one long Buddhist meditation through that winter here. And I think I could do it, but I don't think that it's just huge respect for however you all get through it.
Well, I find it's when you run out of something, you're really out.
Yes.
It's not, you can't just, and it's
That's right.
like, we're really out, sorry. And so my
What's that
guests
thing?
sometimes,
If
it's
you-
like, they're like, how do you do this? You know, a lot
Yeah.
of guests that I have, and it's like, you
I
adapt.
think there's a wonderful kind of limerick that goes with it. If you don't have it, make it. If you can't make it, make do or something. And if you can't make do, do without. Do you know that one? There's about 4 little things in there.
I'm going to find that and hang
I'll see if
that
I
up.
can't find it. It's
I
lyrics.
love that.
Yeah. So Good enough. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you. This was fun.
It's fun for me. I can tell you funny things, but I'll be thinking about them all the way home. Good, thanks.
Thank you.
Oh.